It was nearly midnight when Daniel Reed, the janitor at Brenton Technologies, locked the mop closet. The towering glass building emptied hours ago, but for Daniel, the real work always started late. He moved through the hallways quietly, except for one thing: he sang. Not loud, not obnoxious, just a low, soothing hum of old country songs and soft ballads. It was his way to keep going through the graveyard shift, fighting exhaustion while knowing his 7-year-old son, Liam, was at home with the neighbor until he got back. Daniel hadn't planned this life, being a single father scraping by with 2 jobs. His wife passed away 3 years ago after a sudden illness, leaving him with a toddler and a mountain of hospital bills. Now, he worked at a hardware store by day and cleaned the corporate building at night. People at Brenton Technologies didn't notice him much. Executives rushed by with Bluetooth headsets and coffee cups. Most didn't even make eye contact. But there was one exception: Clara Morgan, the CEO's 8-year-old daughter. Clara was autistic. She rarely spoke at the office daycare, and when she did, it was in fragments. The CEO, Victoria Morgan, a powerful, always composed woman in her early 40s, often brought Clara to the office because traditional schools hadn't worked out. Clara didn't like noise. She didn't like crowds. Most nights, she had trouble sleeping. One evening, as Daniel sang while sweeping the daycare hallway, Clara peeked out from behind the door. She didn't speak, didn't move, just listened. The next night, she waited again. And again the night after that. Slowly, she began sitting cross-legged in the hallway, her head tilted, listening as Daniel sang old lullabies his wife used to sing to Liam. One night, after finishing a song, he heard a tiny voice whisper, "More." It startled him. Clara rarely spoke to anyone. So he sang another. By the time Victoria Morgan came to collect her daughter, Clara was asleep on the hallway bench, something that rarely happened. Victoria stared at Daniel for a long moment but said nothing. She scooped Clara into her arms, surprised her daughter had dozed off so easily. Daniel just nodded politely and went back to his mop. He didn't know that moment would change everything. For the next 2 weeks, it became a quiet routine. Every night, as Daniel pushed his mop bucket down the corridor, Clara would appear like a small ghost in pajamas, silent, waiting. He would smile, kneel, and softly sing while she listened, her small hands fidgeting less and less each night until eventually, she would fall asleep on the bench by the window. Daniel never asked questions. He wasn't paid to babysit, but he wasn't made of stone either. He knew what it was like to lose someone who helped you sleep at night. After his wife's death, Liam had cried himself to exhaustion for months. Songs were the only thing that soothed him. To Daniel, it was simple. A lonely child needed comfort, and he had something to give. But to Victoria Morgan, CEO of Brenton Technologies, things were rarely simple. Victoria was a woman used to control. She had built her company from the ground up after her husband left her when Clara was 2. Her world was schedules, profit margins, and shareholders, a constant storm she navigated with military precision. But Clara was the one thing she couldn't fix. The therapists called it autism spectrum disorder. Victoria called it helplessness. The meltdowns, the sleepless nights, the refusal to eat certain foods, the blank stares when she tried to talk about her day, none of it fit into Victoria's carefully ordered life. So when she discovered her daughter sleeping peacefully in the office for the first time in months, she didn't know whether to feel grateful or suspicious. The turning point came one Thursday evening. Victoria had stayed late for a board meeting. As she walked the executive floor, she heard it, a low male voice singing. Not through speakers, not from a radio. She followed the sound, and there he was, the janitor. Sitting on the floor, mop leaned against the wall, singing softly while her daughter slept curled up on the bench like a kitten. Something in Victoria snapped. "Excuse me," she said sharply. Daniel looked up, startled. He quickly stood, wiping his hands on his coveralls. "Ma'am, she was just..." What is this? Victoria demanded. Why is my daughter here with you? Why are you singing to her? Daniel straightened, confused by her tone. She couldn't sleep. I wasn't hurting her, ma'am. I was just. You are an employee, Victoria cut in. You are not here to interact with my child. Your job is to clean. That's it. Daniel hesitated. I'm sorry. She asked me to sing. It helps her sleep. But Victoria was already shaking her head. She didn't like employees crossing boundaries, didn't like the thought of someone she barely knew being this close to Clara. By morning, Daniel received an email from HR. Daniel stared at the email in disbelief. He had been nothing but respectful. He'd done his job well. Never late, never complained. And now, just like that, he was unemployed. His first thought was Liam. Rent was already behind. His second job barely covered groceries. This night shift had been the difference between sinking and surviving. He called HR, but they told him the decision came directly from the CEO. No further explanation. That evening, Victoria brought Clara to the office again. But something was different. Clara refused to leave the car. Come on, sweetheart, Victoria coaxed. We'll go inside, get some work done. Clara shook her head violently, clutching her stuffed rabbit. Clara, Victoria sighed, glancing at her watch. She was already late for a conference call. Finally, Clara whispered, the singing man, gone. Victoria froze. What? The singing man, Clara said louder this time, tears welling up. Want? Singing man. Victoria didn't know what to say. That night, Clara refused to eat dinner. At bedtime, she screamed for hours, inconsolable. It was the first time Victoria realized her daughter hadn't just been sleeping peacefully. She had been healing. The next day, Clara's teacher reported she was withdrawn and agitated at school. She wouldn't participate in activities, wouldn't talk to anyone. When Victoria asked her what was wrong, Clara said simply, "Bring him back." Victoria stared at her daughter, the weight of what she'd done slowly sinking in. But pride is a heavy thing. She told herself she had made the right choice. That it wasn't appropriate for an employee to interact with Clara this way. She told herself Clara would adjust. But deep down, for the first time in years, Victoria wasn't sure she'd done the right thing. Not as a CEO. Not as a mother. The first week without Daniel felt like a storm no one saw coming. At home, Clara's bedtime became a battlefield. She refused her usual routine, the warm milk, the white noise machine, the special weighted blanket her therapist had recommended. None of it worked anymore. "Sweetheart, please," Victoria begged one night, exhausted from a 14-hour workday. "You have school tomorrow." Clara just curled into a ball, rocking back and forth, whispering the same two words over and over. Singing man, singing man. Victoria tried singing herself. Her voice cracked on the first verse. She hadn't sung since Clara was a baby, back when things were simpler, before her marriage ended and the company consumed her life. Clara shook her head violently. "No, not you, singing man." Victoria felt the words like a punch. At work, it was the same story. The daycare supervisor reported Clara was having meltdowns almost daily. Loud noises she used to tolerate now sent her into panic. She refused to nap. She rarely spoke. One afternoon, Victoria arrived early to find her daughter lying on the daycare rug, staring blankly at the ceiling while the other children played around her. The supervisor knelt beside Victoria and whispered, "She used to nap right here after that janitor sang to her." It was the only time she really relaxed. Victoria stiffened. "Yes, well, he's gone now." The woman gave her a long look. "Maybe he shouldn't be." That night, after Clara finally cried herself to sleep, Victoria sat in the living room staring at her laptop. She pulled up Daniel Reed's employee file. Widower. One dependent child. She scrolled further. His work history was spotless. Never late. Never written up. He'd been making barely above minimum wage. She closed the file feeling something she wasn't used to feeling, guilt. Dash dash dash. 3 days later, she overheard two employees chatting in the break room. Did you hear about Reed? The janitor. Single dad. He was let go last week. Yeah, shame. He was a good guy. Always polite. Hard worker. Guess the CEO caught him singing to her kid or something. Poor guy. Victoria froze outside the door. Poor guy. She had been called many things in her career. Tough, ambitious, even ruthless, but never had she felt so wrong. This wasn't just about company policy anymore. This was about her daughter. Dash dash dash. The breaking point came the following weekend. Victoria took Clara to visit her grandmother, hoping a change of scenery might help. Instead, Clara spent the entire visit curled up on the couch, covering her ears whenever anyone tried to talk to her. When it was time to leave, she tugged at Victoria's sleeve. Mommy. Yes, baby, why you make singing man go away? Victoria's chest tightened. I thought it was better that way. Clara looked at her with eyes too old for an 8-year-old. It not better. It bad. Dash dash dash. That night, Victoria couldn't sleep. She sat in her home office staring at financial reports, but the numbers blurred together. All she could hear was Clara's small, broken voice. It not better. It bad. For years, she had built walls around herself, walls made of work, success, money. But now, for the first time, those walls felt like a prison. And inside it, her daughter was suffering because of her. Dash dash dash. On Monday, Victoria called our. Do you still have Daniel Reed's contact information? She asked. The HR manager hesitated. We do. Would you like us to send him his final paycheck? No, Victoria said softly. I want to talk to him. Dash dash dash. She found his number in the system and sat there staring at it for a long time. What would she even say? Hello, I'm the woman who fired you for comforting my child. Now I want you back because I finally realized my daughter needs you more than my pride does. But before she could work up the courage to call, there was a knock on her office door. It was the daycare supervisor. Ma'am, she said gently, Clara had another meltdown today. She kept asking for the singing man. Maybe you should find him. Victoria swallowed hard. She didn't know if Daniel would even pick up the phone. But she knew one thing. She had made a mistake. And she was running out of time to fix it.